At its surface, it is nothing more than wood and lead, a tool so common we rarely look at it. But for a 10-year-old boy convinced he was a failure, this simple object became the only thing that made sense. Vivaan was 10, and for as long as he could remember, school felt like a losing battle. He sat at his desk, staring at his Ganit ki Pariksha with a heavy, familiar knot in his stomach. Only 2 marks, that was the score. 2 out of 50. The frustration finally boiled over, and in a single sharp motion, he hurled his heavy notebook across the empty room. He didn't just feel like he had failed a test, he felt like he was the mistake. He called himself a mork, a word that felt more permanent with every passing day. This is where many children get stuck. They begin to view a low score not as a temporary lack of knowledge, but as a fixed definition of their own worth. His grandmother didn't come in with a lecture or a scolding. She simply picked up his notebook, sat beside him, and handed him a pencil. She told him that if he looked closely, this pencil could show him exactly how to navigate the mess he was in. She pointed out that a pencil is only capable of greatness if it allows a hand to guide it. In life, we have to be humble enough to accept margajnan, to realize we don't have to carry the weight alone. Then she showed him the eraser. She explained that making a mistake isn't a disaster. The pencil is designed with the expectation that we will slip up. What matters is the ability to sudar, to correct the work and keep going. She reminded him that while the wood gets scratched and worn, the real power is the B3 Shakti, the graphite inside. It's the part of us that stays solid when the outside world gets difficult. But to keep that graphite useful, the pencil has to go through the sharpener. It's a painful process of losing layers, but it's the only way to stay sharp. Kathor parishram, hard work, is the friction that prepares us for the page. Finally, she told him that wherever the pencil goes, it leaves a chop, mark. We have the same responsibility to ensure that our actions leave something meaningful behind. By looking at the pencil as a machine for growth, rather than just a stick of wood, the mechanics of failure started to look different. It wasn't an endpoint, it was a series of adjustments. The shift didn't happen overnight. Vivaan didn't wake up the next morning with all the answers. Instead, he just stopped walking away from the desk. He still struggled. The math problems were still hard, and his pages were often messy where he had to erase and correct dozens of times. But now he didn't throw the book, he just used the eraser. He spent weeks in his own sharpening phase. While other kids were outside, he sat with his graphite and his paper, pushing through the mental exhaustion of repetitive practice. Slowly, the 2s became 5s, then 10s. With every corrected mistake, his belief in his own ability to change grew stronger. The graphite was holding firm. Excellence is rarely a sudden spark. It's the result of 1,000 small, gritty decisions to endure the friction of getting better. Months later, the classroom was silent as the final results were announced. The boy who had once hidden his face in shame had secured Kaksha Mein Pratham Sthan, first position in the class. The shock on his classmates' faces was obvious. They saw a miracle, but Vivaan only saw the months of sharpening that had led to this moment. When his teacher asked how he had turned it all around, he just smiled and mentioned that he had finally learned how to be a pencil. He ran home to find his grandmother. There were no more notebooks being thrown, only a hug that celebrated a very different kind of internal victory. She reminded him then that the pencil she gave him was just a regular tool from the drawer. It didn't have a soul or a secret power. Every word, every solved equation, and every bit of progress came from his own hand. We all have that inner graphite. We just need to be brave enough to start writing.